Okay, I am hosting this panel. I thought I was participant, but now I am hosting as well. So I would love to introduce our panelists while I balance this small child. So please bear with me for just 1 second here. So we have some so the point, yeah, hold on a second. Trying to find the right, so we have 3 panelists here today who are going to be answering any and all of your questions that you have. The first panelist that we have is Dr. Neil Zimmerman. Neil got his PhD at Cornell in '89. He spent 3 years at AT&T Bell Labs, and since '94, he has been working nearby here at NIST. He's an expert in using semiconductor quantum dots for quantum manipulation and for developing standards for quantum based upon that. So welcome, Neil.
Thank you. Next. I am trying to get my video working, but it's not at the moment.
No worries. This buys me time. Excellent. All right. So next I'll introduce Dr. Brandon Rodenberg. Dr. Rodenberg is a physicist and quantum information scientist with a background in quantum optics. He presently is working at MITRE, where he works as a trusted technical advisor for various government agencies. In addition to MITRE, he's an ambassador for the Optical Society of America, where he engages in outreach and mentorship for students and early career professionals within the optics and photonics community. So, Dr. Rodenberg, welcome.
Hello, good to be here.
All right. Yes. Okay. And our last panelist is Dr. Jake Farrenholt, and he is the lead quantum scientist at Booz Allen Hamilton. And he has over 10 years experience in quantum information science, research, and technology. He is a technical advisor to various government clients in this field. He develops workshops and training materials in quantum and helps his clients with strategic planning associated with quantum-led technologies. He also assists in the firm's quantum business development activities at Booz Allen. Before that, he was a research scientist for the U.S. Navy, where he led a team focused on quantum and math research and text data analytics. Okay, and he received his BS in math from the University of Mary Washington in '09. Where'd you get your PhD, Jake? Or Dr. Farenholt?
I got both the master's and PhD from George Mason.
Nice. So. I think I actually knew that, and then it just kind of disappeared. All right. Well, I have some. So the topic of this panel is careers in quantum. All right. So we want to. There are some curated questions that we have, but before we get to that, maybe you could just briefly, each of you in turn, describe your perspectives on, what the state of the quantum industry is right now. So maybe Dr. Rodenberg, we can start with you.
So it's a very fast-moving field, and so my background is primarily in quantum information areas. So generally, this covers things like what quantum can do for computing, for sensing, and for networks. And each of these 3 sort of platforms is at very different stages of development. So for instance, quantum sensors, there's a lot of these that you can actually even buy today. And arguably, for instance, like atomic clocks are an example of a mature quantum sensor that is used to essentially sense time. And so there's lots of commercial opportunities in, say, startups or established companies that are trying to develop next generation sensors. Quantum computing, anyone who's familiar with sort of this field, you've probably seen some news articles, Google has the latest this, IBM has the latest this. So you have a number of both traditional tech players in this field, as well as venture capital money, pumping lots and lots of money in essentially building the world's first large-scale fault-tolerant quantum computer, which, if could be built, we believe it could do computations that you just can't do with a classical computer. So it will be sort of enabling technology for all sorts of other fields in, say, computational chemistry and material science and pharmaceuticals, and possibly also things like machine learning and AI and things like this. Much more long-term are this idea of trying to build a quantum network and possibly ultimately a quantum internet. So obviously a full-blown quantum internet, you need quantum computers to network them up, think our normal internet. So this is very far ahead. It's more like we're sitting in 1940 and we have an idea for a computer, and you're trying to imagine what the internet will look like in 50 years. So this one is, there's not really companies in this space. There are some sort of first generation technologies, but generally, especially in the United States, this is not very lucrative. This is the quantum cryptography systems or quantum key distribution systems. But generally, that's more something that you see in sort of basic research in academia, as well as in national and government labs.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. Dr. Rodenberg, excuse me. Dr. Farenholt, what about your perspectives on things?
Yeah, thanks. I think I'm just gonna sound like a broken record here, because I'm just going to kind of very wholeheartedly agree with a lot of what Dr. Rodenberg said. Right. So quantum information science, can roughly be broken into three different categories: quantum computing, quantum communications, and quantum sensing. Yeah, as just discussed with the quantum computing, we're kind of at that. If you use the analogy of classical computing or computers that we currently know and love, you can go back to kind of the 1940s, 50s, and back in that day when you had these just massive, super clunky devices, took up entire basements. Had a lot of faulty issues with them. They needed an entire team of grad students to be working on them, and that's roughly where we are today with quantum computers. Having this massive lab, very careful, finicky devices that need entire teams of grad students to actually work on them and maintain them. So yes, it's a very exciting time with quantum computing, because there is a lot of excitement to see where we are today, and using that analogy of classical computing to see where we can go in the future. And it's I think, to me, what's more exciting about quantum computing is not what we know we can have with these fault tolerant, universal, scalable quantum computers, but what we don't know yet that we'll be able to achieve. And to me, that's the most exciting part. Quantum communications, it's kind of, you could think of it as two different areas. As Dr. Rodenberg mentioned, there's kind of the quantum internet, the quantum key distribution, and the aspect of quantum communications that fundamentally relies on quantum technologies to distribute entanglement, or distribute secure keys and so forth. But the other direction is actually looking at it from the security standpoint of, it's commonly referred to as post-quantum cryptography. How do we defend our networks against a quantum adversary, leveraging the existing infrastructure we already have? So trying to develop new methods of public key encryption that are secure against a quantum adversary. And then the quantum sensing is by far the most developed field. As already mentioned, right, atomic clocks are already mature devices. One could argue that an MRI machine is a quantum sensor as well. But we're looking at kind of the next generation of quantum sensing. Is how can we push these things to the next level? How can we get past these classical limits of sensitivity to get this higher performance? And so that's definitely an exciting field. Yeah, so that's kind of my long-winded overview of the current state of the art.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Farinholt. Dr. Zimmerman, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, so first of all, I apologize, my camera's not working. Secondly, I invite everyone to just call me Neil. Thirdly, I mentioned this to the host a few days ago. I'm hoping that we can get beyond the previously submitted questions in writing and actually have some live conversation with some of the attenders. So I'm going to give
that. Yes.
So I'm going to give a more concrete set of answers, which will be in alignment with what my two predecessors' answers were. First of all, there is in the United States a consortium called QED-C, the Quantum Economic Development Consortium. This is a consortium that was started by NIST as part of the law that was passed a couple of years ago to enhance the development of quantum coherent industry in the United States. And just as my predecessor said, there are some big companies that are mostly at the moment working in quantum computing and a lot of startups that are working in various aspects of sensors. So again, just to be a little more concrete, recent graduate student who got his PhD with me and the two most recent postdocs all went off to work at fairly large companies on quantum computing applications. I will also mention, because this may be of interest to some of the people, a lot of the jobs at those larger companies are working on military applications. And if you're comfortable with that, then there will be lots of jobs available. If you're not comfortable with that, then you should just be aware of that going in. And it may be that something like sensing is perhaps at those smaller startups is perhaps more comfortable for you. Over.
All right, thanks, Neil, for mentioning the QEDC. Just as a note to everybody, Mason is a member of the QEDC and a founding member as well. And we should be releasing our first industry workforce survey results. Yes, our first industry workforce survey results within the next year. So I would like to follow Neil's lead here, if that's okay, and ask for some audience questions. So please don't be shy. Maybe you can use that reactions button thing where it lets you raise your hand to raise your hand, and we can call on you in that way. So let's.
Patrick, could I also, this is Neil Zimmerman, could I also just mention, the host asked us to put some slides together. I'm definitely not insisting on showing all of them, but if you would like, I have one slide listing various job opportunities at various levels at NIST. Yeah. And so I could show that either now or later, just as an offer.
Do I have to give you permission? Yeah, I do.
You have the permission.
Go for it, Neil.
Okay, hold on. I've got a lot of windows open, so I have to find the right one. There we go. Okay, can you see a slide in editing mode?
Yes.
Okay, so can you now see it in presentation mode?
No.
Okay, well then I'm just going to work in editing mode. So we have a variety of opportunities available at various levels. Probably there aren't any high school students in the audience, but if there are high school students that have a place to live in the local area, then there are paid internships. College students, there's a really big and very lively program for paid internships, including with housing provided. And those typically last for 8 or 10 weeks in the summer. And I have to admit, I did not check ahead of time if George Mason is a member of the SURF, the SURF program. But if they are, then it's a really excellent, excellent. That's a really nice thing. Again, I don't know if there are any graduate students in the audience, but NIST, between its two locations in Colorado and Maryland, have probably something like 1,000 graduate students at any one time. And we have two different types of postgraduate, postdoctoral fellowships. And I'm just going to stop because I don't want to take up a lot of time.
Thank you, Neil. And we can certainly make slides like that available to our attendees after the after these events are done, if that is of interest to you. We're always happy to advertise internship opportunities. All right, so
Patrick, if I might jump in, and actually to second that, as sort of a more generalized version of what Neil just said. it's good to know, and this isn't something that was obvious when I was a student, that a lot of these sort of government and national labs have these kind of internship programs. And so if you know the name of any lab, you could probably look up their website and find a place to apply for internships. And these kinds of programs, some of them are, for instance, during the year, but a lot of them are during the summer. And for instance, so MITRE also is a place that runs one of these. I know that a lot of interns ultimately come back and work with us. So it's also sort of it can get your foot in the door at a lot of these places. So at the very least, it can show you, get you some experience and see what you like or maybe what you don't like. But also it could directly help with finding jobs after you graduate.
Thanks, Brandon. And yeah, I second all of that. You know, internships as a part of a graduate career can be a very important and accelerating factor for finding yourself employment afterwards. Okay, Jake, did you want to say fun things too?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can just mention that you know, we're I'll say the Booz Allen quantum team is always actively hiring, and you don't necessarily need a PhD and with a quantum background to be able to start with our team. And on the industry side, there's a lot more than just being a quantum engineer. That can actually help the entire industry there. So we have people actually who come in to our team with a business marketing background, and we get them trained up in the technology piece, and then leverage their business development background to actually kind of build out our capabilities even further. We've had people with computational biology come in, and that's been really exciting because then they're able to bring their expertise to the field of quantum computing. So they're teaching us while we're teaching them, and we grow this really neat little micro ecosystem within our team where we can actually go beyond the very focused efforts on just the specific technologies and the pieces and components of quantum itself, but looking broader at its applications, how it's used, how it'll be integrated, how it's transitioned, and kind of the business side, looking at the open source analysis and everything in between. Yeah, I could go on and on here about kind of our whole business profile with quantum, but I just want to make sure we're not distracting. I'll get too far off track here. I see there are some questions coming up.
Yeah, no, all great points, Jake. And again, I guess my role as a host is to just restate your things. But yeah, I mean, this is a really broad field. I mean, this is largely brand new. So quantum literacy is needed, not a quantum physics degree. All right. Yeah, many of you students who are on here, you're already developing a large swath of the skills you need to succeed in this space. There's just a little bit of, supplementing that would need to be done to make you truly able to go after these positions. So we have our first question from Jason Lee. So Jason, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, basically for those that are postdocs thinking of changing fields, is the quantum industry accepting of that?
Have at it, friends.
I can take that one. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not exactly sure what your background is precisely. But yeah, I mean, that's if you're interested in, say, just moving out of academia into industry, that's certainly an avenue that I personally think is worth pursuing. It's what I've done myself. But yeah, I mean, we typically will, like I said earlier, we'll hire people with bachelor's, master's, PhDs, postdocs, everything in between. So yeah, and bringing that expertise from academia is certainly valuable, especially from the teaching perspective. So a lot of what Booz Allen does is actually provide, we focus heavily on explaining the complex topics of quantum information science to people who don't necessarily have that background in a very concise and easy to understand way. So having the teaching background that you bring along with the technical expertise is certainly something that's extremely valuable to us.
All right. Well, to clarify, I was in QIS back in 2007 to 2009, and then I stopped. I went and got my PhD and focused on astrophysics. But after I was done with the PhD, I started looking into other fields of interest of myself. And since I saw quantum computing advance so much in just 10 years, I was curious about coming back in. And I just wanted to know, am I too out of the loop to come back in? You know what I mean?
May I make a comment? Neil Zimmerman. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, Jake, maybe quickly, and then Neil.
Sorry. Yeah. I guess I would just say, it does depend on what you're looking for. If you want to jump back in and suddenly, it may take a while to get up to speed because, as you mentioned, right, quantum computing has advanced tremendously. I mean, if you step out of it for even 6 months, coming back in you're playing a good bit of catch up. Just the rate of advancement here is really quite impressive. But I think it would largely depend on what you're looking for. If you're looking to say maybe step out of the engineering side and work in a more consulting role, then sure, right? You don't necessarily have to be able to talk about all of the individual little pieces, but being able to get up to speed on what the current state of the art is and the ability to explain that is something you can get up to speed on pretty quickly. So yeah, I guess I would just say it's going to largely depend on what specifically it is you're looking for.
Okay, thanks. I would look into internships or fellowships, whatever is applicable for postdocs these days.
Neil, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, again, I'd like to add some more concrete responses. If you are looking for an experimental job, then my experience, as I mentioned from the previous 3 people with whom I worked, is that you don't need to have an up-to-the-minute knowledge of the QIS field, just as Dr. Farenholt just said. But in my experience, the companies are looking for some relevant experimental expertise. So that could be thin film fabrication and processing. For the solid state qubits, it could be low temperature, high frequency measurements. For the atomic and ion.
Or even just cryogenics, right? Just knowing cryogenics is valuable these days.
Right. For ion and atoms, it's vacuum techniques. And then for all of them, especially ions, atoms, and photons, it's any optical expertise you have. On the theoretical side, I would say if you have knowledge of computer science or mathematics or quantum physics, any of those 3, it is fairly likely that companies will be interested in you. And I hope that's useful. Over.
Yes, thank you. I actually have experience in all 3, but very little experience in the actual lab. I worked with the equipment, but was never really allowed to do much manipulation with it.
So we want to make sure we get on to some other questions. Brandon, if you have a quick comment on that.
So I was just going to say, as an example of someone who it sounds like had a very parallel experience to you, one of the members of our group actually was a particle physicist who essentially jumped fields and came over to quantum information. So he did the grad route, he did a postdoc, and then just decided particle physics wasn't for him. And he was successfully able to navigate that transition.
All right. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
All right. Great first question for us. Now we have a question in the chat from Jenshi.
Sorry, may I add one small thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
There is so much money going into quantum right now that, again, if you have some relevant expertise, probably you're going to be able to find a job. I think that's the short version of what we're all saying. Over.
Right. So we have a question in the chat from a Mason undergraduate, Jianxi Tang. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, friend. And Jianxi is a civil engineering bachelor's, and a computer science master's in progress. And he wants to have a suggestion about how he could transition into quantum. Or she, sorry.
So this is
Sure,
Neil
I
Zimmerman. I'll
can-
just make a short suggestion. Just do an internship. With a computer science master's, you can probably find an internship, and then you can leverage that to get to a more permanent job. Over.
Yeah, and I can,
quick
I can
comment,
add on to that
Jianxi.
as
We can help with that at QSEC, so go for it. Shameless plug.
yeah.
Also
and
with
I'll just
Oh, go ahead.
Good. I was just gonna kind of build on that. Right. So again, this comes down to what you're interested in. Given the computer science background, just having some experience in quantum computing programming, being able to demonstrate that, and that's something you can do through an internship. It's something you could do on your own time. But just playing around with the different tools and just seeing how they work, seeing how they piece together. And just being able to demonstrate some, basic competency in that, and being able to build off of your computer science background, I think is certainly helpful.
Thank you.
And in terms of the going out on your own and just testing on these things, a lot of the large platforms have access online for everyone. So you can go and log in. If you just Google, for instance, like IBM Quantum, you actually can do programming on their devices for free. And so anyone who even wants to just play around on these systems has access to them if they'd like.
Okay.
Jianxi, one last point that's particular to Mason. We have a course in the physics department that's launched a couple of years ago that focuses on an introduction to quantum computing, and it sanitizes the course of physics. So it's purely about how one would program a quantum computer. And during that course, you actually train on the IBM QuizKit system. And you're certainly able to take that as a computer science master's in progress student. So we can always talk more. And a lot of our work is in terms of research in the center has been more and more lately in joint projects with Booz Allen and MITRE. So that's something we can also perhaps help guide with. So feel free to email any of the panelists, Neil, Jake, Brandon, or me, and we can keep the conversation going. All right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No questions.
Oh, here I have some previously collected questions from our registers, and one of them is that they want to know the pros and cons to go directly to industry after graduating universities with a bachelor's degree, or go to a graduate school and get a PhD or master's after it. I guess everyone here is a PhD, so answer is that obvious?
I can tackle this one. So my general advice has generally been, especially the highest level, the PhD, you do a PhD because you want to do a PhD. A lot of the advantages, if you're just looking for like maximizing lifetime income, getting a master's and then going into industry is a good chance that you'll end up lifetime making more money. So you might have a higher starting salary, say coming out of a PhD, but you effectively lost 6 years where you're frankly poor. So you could make 8 times as much as a grad student.
You're rich in spirit,
getting a
though.
job.
Very rich in spirit.
Rich in spirit. That being said, I would not have traded my PhD experience for the world. If it's something, the idea of going and disappearing for half a decade and just deeply diving into something is the sort of thing you love, it's a very worthwhile experience. But it has to be sort of internally rewarding for that sort of pursuit, not I'm checking a box, to get a job, because it will just drain the life out of you. I've seen too many people drop out or just totally regret their time doing that. But I do think generally in tech fields, going to the master's level will give you, if you're just thinking about income, will definitely give you a bump in income. That being said, there are plenty of jobs that you can do a bachelor's, and harping again on the internship, a great way to get a job right out of the bachelor's is get an internship that gets your foot in the door, and either a job there, or now you have a resume where you have not just professors, but actual people in industry that are giving you letters of recommendation. And that's usually a great step to get you in a company. And a lot of companies will, in the tech field, if you need that master's level work, might actually pay for your master's program. So going into industry doesn't mean you've given up on getting a higher beyond bachelor's. That those doors are still open to you.
Yeah, and I can actually build on top of that. You know, myself personally, I started working right after undergrad and did the master's and PhD while fully employed. It took a lot longer than it would if I were a full-time student, like a lot longer. But at the same time, as Dr. Rodenberg mentioned, you know, I was actually making a full-time income during that entire period. And yeah, actually a friend of mine, I ended up hiring him after he got a PhD. And so we had both started grad school at the same time. He finished his PhD before me, but yeah, I mean, the disparity in it, because he was coming in making more than I made when I first started, but a lot less than you know, someone who had, you know, 7 or 8 years of work experience behind them. So yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind, right? If your goal is, you know, looking at lifetime income, then maybe doing both in tandem isn't necessarily a bad you know, thing to do. And you know, as mentioned already, a lot of you know, government and industry will actually provide funding support in pursuit of those degrees.
May I add just one concrete thing? This is Neil Zimmerman. So if your goal is to either maximize your lifetime income or to become a manager in one of these companies or to start your own company, then a bachelor's degree is fine. If your ultimate desire is to be a team leader, a scientific leader in a more research or applied research area, then probably getting a PhD either right away or at some later point is the best way for you to have a chance to be a real science leader or team leader at a company. Over.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I think it's also fair to expand that point a little bit to say, in a lot of ways, the PhD is not just like a master's plus. So in a lot of ways, a master's is sort of bachelor's, and then you kind of move a step further. A PhD is totally different. So you do have classes, but it's sort of the least important part of your PhD. I knew plenty of people who sort of barely got through the classes, but excelled at doing a PhD. PhD is the ability to go off on your own and do and create research from scratch, which is a very different skill set than, you know, reading books and taking tests and the things that you normally do in a class. And so, yeah, so this is the big reason why Neil, I think, was pointing out that if that's what you want to do, you want to do that deep research where you're creating, a PhD is the route, is a route to go to do that.
So if I may add to that point, this is Zishan from NIST. I have had a couple of students who have chosen the route of going out to industry for a couple of years and then choosing to go back to grad school. And the way it worked out for them was they weren't sure what they wanted to do. So if you're not sure that the, you know, quantum or physics or whatever it is that you're interested in is something you want to dedicate the next 6 to 8 years of your life and possibly longer, then, you know, it's better to just find out, is this something I want to do for the next 10 years of my life? So in one case, I had a student who was sort of interested in physics, went and worked for a company, and then realized that what they were really interested in was autonomous systems. So now they're getting their PhD at Stanford in autonomous vehicles. And another one is getting, rather than staying in engineering, is doing neuromorphic computing out in Duke. So they went out, worked for a company, and realized, oh, slightly different areas are what I'm really interested in, and I do want a PhD. And it worked out better for them. So just another thing to keep in mind, if you're going to go to grad school, you really should be going in with a purpose. It shouldn't be the, I don't know what else to do. So, and I've seen some friends do that, where they weren't sure that they should go to grad school, but went anyway. So it's not the most productive use of your time, a PhD, because you will be spending a lot of time working on things that are, you know, you may not like to do.
Okay, so thank you. How much time do we have left on the clock? Because we're starting to get some questions coming in yeah, I see that one, Neil. Thank you. On the in the chat.
We still have 15 minutes. We have the time scheduled
All
until
right.
12.
So we also want to give our speakers a chance to talk, or our panelists to talk a little bit about the exact work they do. But I think let's go ahead and answer the next, have the panelists answer the next question here. And then in the last 5 minutes, maybe you guys can each take a minute or so to tell us about specifically what you are doing on a daily basis. So from QSEC admin, we have, so if I wanted to do a lot of hands-on work where I can physically make things happen, not necessarily coursework, PhD would be preferred over a master's. Oh, Neil answered it in the chat. Neil, do you want to just answer it verbally for everybody?
Sure, thank you. You can do hands-on work with any level of degree. As we were all discussing a few minutes ago, a PhD is for two reasons. As Brandon said, it's because you're driven to do original research. That's why I got a PhD. And the second reason is if you ultimately want the opportunity to be a science leader, either in your company or in research or in applied research, then you're going to have the best chance with a PhD. But if, as the person wrote, I want to do a lot of hands-on work where I can physically make things happen, not necessarily coursework. You don't need a PhD to start turning knobs and taking data and analyzing it, but you may be working under a PhD who is the overall mentor of the whole effort. Over.
And to kind of add to that, I think a better way of phrasing, so I think that you were thinking, oh, grad school is, or PhD is lab and master's is just courses. A better distinction would be a PhD is like going back to early childhood. It's 6 years of open play, effectively. Well, what's the goal of that play? The play itself is the goal. It's sort of this very open-ended, not very rigid structure where you're just exploring. And that's not necessarily the best for giving you a specific skill at something. If you wanted a specific skill, you go and train for that specific skill. But what it does, and this is why leadership is so intimately tied with this, is it makes you incredibly flexible. So just like play as a child kind of makes you a better person, and you can deal with new and different situations as you grow older. Like a PhD is really like staying in that space for a long period of time in a very technical way. And so when new things come up, you're like, oh, I've seen new things before. I know how to attack this problem and like come and create new solutions. And so you might not be the best at aligning your lab setup or anything like this. There's a lot of technicians and things that I've seen that can just outperform sort of a lot of the minutiae of the technical work that a PhD can do. But the PhD kind of spent a lot of time in that sort of creative space. And so is a lot more adaptable at what's the new thing coming up and quickly sort of adapting to new and exciting areas of research, which is why they tend to lead research teams.
Okay, we had a question in chat from Wu Ram Lee. Wu Ram is seeking a quantum algorithm researcher position in industry. How much relevant experience does a hiring manager usually expect for something like that?
So I can, I'll take a first stab at that. So yeah, I think from my perspective, when I'm interviewing candidates who come in saying, hey, I'm interested in doing quantum algorithm research, I'm looking at not only their competency and demonstrate on the resume that they've actually demonstrated an ability to do that, but also the additional soft skills that are necessary. So it's one thing to be someone who just spends their days doing research in quantum algorithm development. That's great and it's important, right? There's definitely a need for that out there. On the industry side, right, we're driven by more than we do contribute to the fundamental research, but that's not our only goal. We also have a requirement to be billable. And so I'm generally looking for additional skills as well that we can leverage on top of that. So starting at the baseline of I know this and understand this and can contribute to the research, and then building out from there, saying, okay, how can we use this person to contribute to the firm? So are they able to provide training material? Are they able to explain this, in a clear, concise way? Are they able to, transition this into a capability? And so looking at the additional soft skills, so having that core technical base is very important, but then building out from there, the soft skills is what I'd be looking for next.
I'll echo what you just said. Having the ability to communicate the information is something that is much rarer than you may think, and is something that's highly valued.
Well, a similar question, sorry, a similar question we got as pre-collected is that what is the expectation for an experimentalist, like a graduate from, for example, condensed matter experimentalist?
So this is Neil Zimmerman. I'll handle that one. Again, there's so much money going into this field that you don't need to be an expert in computer science, math, and quantum physics. If you have some amount of relevant experience experimentally, either low temperature, high frequency measurements, or thin film lithography and processing, or vacuum techniques and optical techniques, any of those, you're likely to get one or more offers. If you don't have any of that expertise, then I would suggest perhaps the best thing to do is to try to get a postdoc where you're telling the people to whom you're applying that you're interested in changing fields. I have certainly multiple times in my career hired postdocs who were not in my field before then because they looked like good candidates. They had, in addition to good physics general knowledge, they had the soft skills that Brandon and Dr. Farenholt mentioned. And so I said, that's fine. Let's hire them because we want the best candidates. But again, if you have any relevant experimental expertise, that should be enough to have companies be interested in you. Over.
Okay. So I think Zhenqi Tang has been trying to say something for quite some time now, and she has obeyed the hand raising rules. Sorry, Robert Cooper, you're going to wait for a minute. So Zhenqi, why don't you go ahead and then we'll do Rob next.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. So I asked question before about like how I go to switch, but one additional information is currently I work full time in the IT field, like as like an automation tester. But I'm thinking whether should I like stop work and fully concentrate on like I'm thinking about go for PhD in the I'm still debating whether should I go like quit my job and go apply PhD or just work and also do school at the same time. Yeah, I want some suggestions.
I would suggest the first place to start is see if your company will pay for you to do it. Because like Jake said, it might take a little longer, but then you don't have to give up your salary. And so it's not, your standard of living or going back to school. You might be able to do both. So I think that at least getting more information about that part of it might help you decide if it's worth it or not.
So this is Neil. I'm just going to repeat what Brandon said a while ago. If the idea of working and producing original research absolutely enthralls you, then I would suggest you go for a PhD full time. If it doesn't absolutely enthrall you, then the answer that Brandon just gave also makes sense to me.
I see.
Also, I do want to, and again, this will come out in the policy paper where we're going to be releasing in the next year. But a lot of the jobs are in PhDs right now because this is a brand new field. And so the cutting edge of the knowledge is coming out each year. However, making the quantum industrial ecosystem happen requires a lot of people, and it requires application architects, right? It requires systems engineers. It requires traditional skill sets just applied to quantum problems. So if you're part of the way through a master's, you may want to see, what is out there that you could get and that would put you on that path before you take the deep dive into the PhD program. Because as the other panelists have said, you don't want to invest that time without, either having a burning, firing passion for it or a clear goal at the end. So I'm going to allow Jake, Brandon, and Neil to kind of tell us a little bit about what type of work there is out there, right, in each one of their organizations. And then Rob, if that's okay with you, then we'll close with your question, all right? So guys, you each get a roughly 90 seconds or so, but you're on Scout's honor because I'm not going to time. Let's start with Jake because he's the closest in the window.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so Booz Allen Hamilton at its heart is it's a consulting firm, and so a lot of what we do is in that domain. Our goal is to be within the quantum team in particular. Our goal is to be the trusted advisor to the U.S. government in all things related to quantum. So we are actually service driven instead of product driven. So we actually don't make our profit by going out and building and selling widgets. We make our profit off of, being the trusted advisor. So within our team, we kind of have, within quantum information science, as I mentioned earlier, there's the 3 different areas, quantum computing, quantum communications, and quantum sensing. And then within each of those, we have 3 different types of services that we provide. So you can kind of picture a 3x3 grid. So the first type of service we provide is actually the fundamental research, where we're actually contributing to the research, actually publishing papers, presenting at conferences in the absence of COVID, and actually contributing to the field, so that we can actually demonstrate that we truly do understand and are able to contribute to the field. We're not just talking the talk, we can actually walk the walk. And then the next service that we provide is more of the apps, demos, and technical SME support. So actually looking at different case studies that our clients bring to us that say, hey, here's this scenario I'm concerned with, can you do a deeper dive into this and help me understand how this particular, quantum paradigm is going to affect this particular mission, and do that much deeper dive in a very technically focused way. And then the last is more of the traditional strategy and consulting role, where we may have a client come to us that says, hey, I think I can spell the word quantum, but I don't necessarily understand the technology, and moreover, I'm not necessarily interested in getting a PhD level understanding of it, but here is my mission. Here is what I need to do. My job is to make sure that my ships float, or what have you. And then and for those clients, they just want to understand, how is this emerging technology, how is this quantum technology going to impact my ability to complete my mission today, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, and so forth. And for those clients, we provide various levels of training to get them at least familiar with it and its impact to their mission. We provide more of an open source analysis, a global picture. Hey, who's doing what in quantum around the world, and help so that they can use that to guide their own strategies. And then if the client asks, we'll provide policy recommendations. Here are the policies you can be implementing today to either mitigate the threats that this quantum technology may provide, or take advantage of the exploit the technology to your advantage. So we try to cover our full bases, but it's very service driven instead of product driven. But that's the very quick snapshot. I hope I didn't speak too quickly here, but trying to fit everything into a 90-second window. But that's a snapshot of Booz Allen Quantum.
Okay, Neil, do you want to go next?
Sure, but there's not time for both me and Brandon to go, so I think I'm just going to skip, especially because you also wanted to answer Bob's question. Over.
All right, Brandon, have at it.
All right, I'll try to be fast. So first, MITRE also is in sort of this trusted advisor role, very similar to Booz Allen. We're organizationally slightly different. So Jake mentioned like how they get their profit is they're selling service. Profit is not part of MITRE because we are, rather than a private sort of just company, we're actually a national lab. So technically it's an FFRDC, Federally Funded Research and Development Center, which is the same designation as say like a Los Alamos or an Oak Ridge. Distinguished between say a government lab like NIST in that I'm not a government employee, but like a government lab, our budget is set by the US federal budget. It's a line item in the US annual budget. And so money has already been pre-allocated by government agencies. And so rather than sort of convincing a government agency to give us money, they've already given us money. Congress already decided that. And so then these relationships are just, well, what do they want us to do? And so there's all sorts of rules by being this special type of entity to try to avoid conflicts of interest. Because the whole point of these kind of institutions is, to use that phrase, trusted advisor role. So we're not allowed to produce and sell things, for example. That's a big one. So effectively, our advice or our service is the only thing we're allowed to do. And so generally, we do a lot of the same things that Jake was talking about, the research, as well as product demos and making prototypes and things like this. We do get involved in like IP development and things like this. It's just, if you get to the point where this is a product that could be profitable, you spin it off or you license it. You license the IP. So we still have patents and things like that. We just can't then make 1 million of them and make a profit on them and sell them. Yeah, so similarly, we're in all areas. So we're a little different than most labs in that technically we're 6 different labs, each connected to different parts of the government. So effectively, any government agency, there's probably at least one MITRE person sitting there. Including, for instance, NIST is one of our parent organizations. So we run the National Cybersecurity National Lab, which is, for instance, keeps track of every single vulnerability and computer exploit and worm out there. That, for instance, your antivirus software that says it protects you from 100 million different viruses comes from that list, for example. We do advisement in all the areas, computing, sensing, networking, but we do have a number of efforts currently in a number of these areas. So for example, we're developing a number of quantum sensing technologies that I can't really get into, but like NV sensors and using atomic systems, so warm atomic vapors, plus laser systems as electrometers, essentially a quantum radar. We are doing a lot of work sort of behind the scenes on sort of the government side of things, trying to advance the state of quantum research in the US. So for instance, in networking, where there's a major push to essentially build a quantum networking center that would be a combination of a number of government agencies, government labs, and university partners.
You're going to hate me because I think Rob has waited so patiently, and since we're technically over time, we should let him ask his question. But there's the breakout rooms 1 and 2 in Gathertown where you can digitally migrate to and maybe have an additional longer conversation with Jianxi, Jason, Wu Ram, and anybody else on this call who's interested in employment in the quantum industry, especially at MITRE. Forget about these Booz Allen nerds. Just kidding. So let's let Rob ask his question. Go for it, Rob, and we'll close out with that. That'll be our last question.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to ask about just the job opportunities for like hands-on research. I know universities and government, I guess there's a distinction between government and national labs that I wasn't aware of, but what is it like for hands-on research in those fields versus like private sector like MITRE and other Booz Allen Hamilton, I guess. They sort of talked about it a little bit in their answers.
So this is Neil. I'll take that one. I wrote this briefly in the chat window as an answer to your question, but at the sort of 80% level, basic research is mostly happening at national labs and universities. And what's happening in the private sector is more applied research. That's, I think, a fairly accurate short answer. And also, if you're confused about what Brandon said about lab versus U.S. government, IST is, as Brandon said, is part of the U.S. government. We are a national lab. MITRE is not part of the U.S. government. It is also a national lab. So I would say national labs is a more encompassing term that includes both private sector fully funded by the US government and true US government agencies like NIST. Over.
Yeah, and I can build on that from the industry side. Just kind of reiterate what Neil said, and you know, agree with that. That yeah, if your goal is to do long-term a career in R&D and fundamental research, then going the national lab route, the government or MITRE, definitely would probably, you're more likely to be able to have an established career at places like that. Whereas in industry, the goal with R&D is to eventually, you know, find a way to turn a profit. So there are opportunities, and we have folks on our team where our goal with them is not to, you know, have some, you know, profitability within 3 years or something like that, but actually, you know, kind of incubate this capability, long-term capability development. But those are very, very hard to get in industry, and it's very hard to have a long-term established career in the basic R&D if industry is the direction you want to go. So you have to be willing, you have to understand that you're going to need to be a bit flexible and in kind of the industry realm if R&D is what you want to do.
I will say just 10 seconds more. Research and industry, a lot of startups are doing a lot of things that they essentially are taking right when the basic research, you know, is starting to commercialize. And so there's a lot of basic research opportunities in startups. Just know that most startups fail. And so you might make more money, you might have stock options, so high risk, high reward. But if you're willing to go work for a few years, if it works out, you know, you're set. And if it doesn't work out, you go to another place. That's another option for you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Patrick, you're muted.
Okay, so on that note, I'd really like to thank the three of you guys for making the time today to answer these questions. And also I'd like to thank all the students and professionals who are here today and asking great questions. And you know, feel free to reach out to anyone here to learn a little bit more, and also to you know, get some assistance if needed in you know, figuring out your path forward. You know, we're all here to help. So thank you all. I believe we are now on a break until 2. Is that correct, Fangyu?
Yes.
All right, so we are on a break, and everybody enjoy a very nice healthy lunch, eat your leafy greens, and we'll see everyone back around 2 to check out some posters. And if I don't happen to see you, thank you guys so much for coming. This is a lot of fun, and we'll look forward to having it again next year. Cheers.
This is Neil Zimmerman.
Thanks,
Just wanted to
Patrick.
say thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I'll just say, you know, our group is always hiring. So, you know, send resumes. We're always looking to grow our group.
All right, you heard them, kids. All right, everybody, take care. Happy eating. And if you want to talk to these people, they might be in the Gather Town room. So go, you know, digitally saunter on over. All right, bye.
Bye.